Those of you who've walked out on first dates, what was your I'm out of here moment? Once went out on a date after band practice at a beer bar in the city. I was carrying my cello with me, and my date said, "I'll be there with my laptop in black clothes." So I show up to the bar, and there she is, sitting in a U-shaped booth. So, I join her, and she just looks up from her screen and says with an incredulous look, "Hello." She doesn't look quite like her pictures either, but I just roll with it. I try to make some small talk, and she's distant. I didn't understand what was happening, but she made only the most compulsory conversation, and seemed generally uncomfortable. When I finally said something like, "Are you going to talk to me, or just sit on your laptop?" she snapped and said something like, "Get away from me, you creep." Appalled, I threw on my jacket, grabbed my cello, and stormed out feeling rather dejected. 10 minutes later I get a text from her saying, "I'm here." That's why she didn't quite look like her pictures. She gave me enough one-word answers to bore me out of my mind. Date lasted 30 minutes and not a second longer. Her first question was, "What is my salary?" I knew she was one of those gold digger girls and I do not want an arranged marriage with her. Walked out when I realized that I had to carry the conversation through the whole evening. She looked like a Photoshop of her profile picture. Wait, isn't that supposed to be in reverse? She said she was into pool, so we went to a bar to play a couple of games. It was a bar she was a regular at, and at one point about 4 of her friends showed up. The girl I was there with asked if I wanted another beer while they all went to the bar. After they got a round of drinks and shots, the bartender waved me over, and asked if I wanted them all on my tab. Apparently she'd said I was cool with it. I just laughed and shook my head. He said, "If you dip right now I'll handle it." Bro never even turned around to look at her, got some wings on the way home, and had a great night. Her boyfriend's buddy saw us and confronted her about it. It was a huge shock because we'd been talking for a few weeks and I thought we were really hitting it off. I told the guy to tell his friend I was sorry and had no idea, got up and left. She showed up with a friend and was expecting me to cover the tab for both of them. When I was polite to the waitress and she screamed at me, "Would you rather be on a date with her then?" At least she was nice enough to drop that massive red flag early on. She said that she was just there for free drinks. I'm not joking, she literally said that after 30 minutes or something, you should have made a toilet excuse and got out of there. Hence being the one who gets free drinks. Also, she would learn a lesson at least. At about the 7-10 minute mark of one-word answers or silence with her head buried in a phone, I excused myself to go to the bathroom and left. When I was dating I had so many girls spend more time on their phones than talking to me. I used to just start carrying cash to the date. If she spent more time on the phone than talking to me, I just dropped some on the table and walked out. When I realized she wasn't the one in the picture from the dating site. We were at a restaurant and the waitress came over and gave the standard greeting, "Welcome to. Can I start you off with some drinks?" I order a water and a drink and then looked at my date and said, "And whatever she is getting." My date then looked at me, looked at the waitress, looked back at me with a confused look on her face. So Elle asked, "Was she okay or need more time to look?" My date then clears her throat and asked me if I knew the waitress. I said no. Why? The date then went on a rant on why the waitress was talking to me and looking my direction when she should only be talking to and looking at her. I was shocked and was like, "What?" She then goes on about how if me and the waitress has something going on, just let her know now. At this point I looked at the waitress and told her to cancel my drink order, apologized to her, then I got up and left. When I got to my car I blocked the date's number and everything. First date, we're meeting at a new pizza place in town. She tells me to get out of my car first. She then sees me and laughs, going, "That's your tiny ass car." We're in line to create our own pizza. We're talking. Mid-conversation she pulls out her phone and blocks me on Tinder and Snap visibly in front of me. Walked out in the middle of our dinner as she's asking me where I'm going. She would not stop texting and taking selfies. After the 5th selfie, I got up and said I'm gonna leave. I used to work at a very high-end restaurant. Whenever ladies that were clearly in it just for the food or the cash of being there at this nice place with some poor sap, or some rich sap that they were clearly using, and were taking selfie after selfie and filming and photographing every goddamn thing I brought to the table, I liked to make us real awkward for them by asking, oh, would you like me to take some photos of the happy couple on date night? Here, I'll take some good photos so you're not stuck with just selfies. Scooch together now. It was my guilty pleasure, because the ladies would get so cagey about any photo evidence of who they were actually dining with. Funny how they all of a sudden didn't want 5,000 pics when the guy had to be involved. Throughout the dinner date she made fun of me and being condescending for having a job while she's an aspiring entrepreneur who's gonna build her own empire. Multi-level marketing, right? Candles and stretch pants or essential oils. I was going to see a friend perform and offered to pick her, my date, up so we wouldn't have to pay double for parking. Dumb move. When I got there, she was S-faced and started loudly discussing her sexual exploits and familial issues. After dinner I said, yeah, I'm gonna take you home now. Then I went to the show / had a great night alone, lol. Me and this girl had plans to go to a small indoor bluegrass concert. So I drove over to her place and when Elle arrived she told me plans had changed and that her friends were driving. Cool, I can have a drink at the show. Friend shows up, honks the horn and we run out and jump into the car. 5 minutes into the drive I noticed driver is driving really fast and swerving. I tell her it's okay if we show up late, we will get there when we get there. About this time I noticed the slur in her speech. I looked at my date and I whispered to her if driver has been drinking. She told me they were day drinking all day. I almost yelled, you knew this? She said yes and didn't know what the big deal was all about. I asked the driver to pull over on the highway, I want out. She refused and my date told driver to ignore me. We get to the show safely. I called a cab and left. Didn't say a word to anyone. We ended up at the police station. We closed down the restaurant where we were eating, and we were going to a bar for some drinks. She got pulled over on the way, and failed her field sobriety test. I was waiting in my car, saw her get put in handcuffs. I was in the middle of mouthing WTF when the cop made me get out and do a field sobriety test, which I obviously passed, then made me come to the police station with them. She evidently showed up hammered to the date. There were a couple of red flags but I had chalked it up to first date butterflies. When I went to pick her up she introduced me to her 3-year-old son as dad. Ugh. My kid's mom used to do this late to the party but halfway through the date, she asked me out. I'm an escort so if you wanted to F me would have to charge. I had a woman call me and insisted I gave her my number one night when I was bartending a small music venue during a concert. The name and description didn't sound familiar, but we chatted for a few nights and decided to meet. I will call her Bonnie. We met up at a bar in her part of town. Bonnie looked a little familiar but not someone I would have given my number to. She was totally not my type. But I decided to not be rude and gave the one date a chance. Somewhere in the course of the evening we started sharing pictures from our phone. Here is my dog, here is my son, here is me in Vegas, etc. Then Bonnie showed me a pic. This is me and my best friend Sarah. I looked and Sarah looked very familiar. Sarah was my type and I totally remember chatting it up with her and gave her my number. Then it occurred to me that Bonnie was the woman standing behind Sarah the whole time just minding her own business the night I gave my number out at my place of work. Basically her best friend Sarah catfished me in person on behalf of her friend. I left. So I didn't technically walk out or anything but I made sure it ended fast. Girl is 26 and I'm just giving her a ride to her car like 2 parking lots away towards the end of the date. Her phone is ringing and when she answers can hear her mom yelling at her saying get out of that car now. The girl tried to play it off but Elle heard clearly so I said let's get out and I'll walk you there. Her parents had been spying on our date. She's 26. I felt so bad and so much second-hand embarrassment but I was creeped out. I couldn't give her a second date even though she wanted one, and still wanted a kiss after I walked her to her car. It was so depressing. I just can't deal with weirdo parents like that at this age. She showed up and we order drinks. She has a drink, then we order a pitcher of bourbon lemonade. She drinks 3/5 ths of it. Then a pitcher of beer. Within the hour, She's hammered and telling me about her f'd up life. By the end of hour 2, she's eaten nothing but is so drunk that her brain seems to be operating on autopilot. She starts to cry and says, "I always do this." I got her a cab and took off. It was bizarre. Got a bit catfished, old pics or something. She showed up much bigger than her pics. I'm not shallow, so L just said S happens and continued the date. I don't really mind a little wait, but it was a shock. No conversation skills, no interest. We are at a super pricey Italian place, 50 plus a plate. I go to the bathroom and come back. She had eaten her dish and was digging into mine. Just dead eyes at me as I approached. I paid half and just left. It was a weird effing night. She called me later and freaked out on me for leaving her half the bill. After kissed she said, "Actually I'm married." Had one where after we kissed she said she was in an open relationship. I joked, "Does he know?" It got real quiet and awkward after that. When she pulled a puppet out of her handbag and it was the puppet's birthday. I'm laughing my ass off and secretly wishing you had gone on a second date. Puppet's birthday is gold. She told me she starved her pet hamster so she could get a dog when she was in high school because her parents wouldn't let her have multiple pets, and she laughed while telling me about it. My time to shine. Met this girl on Instagram. She was super attractive, athletic, funny, and really extroverted. We lived in the same area, surprisingly, 2 streets down from me. It was a win-win. We talked for a while, flirted etc., and scheduled a lil date at the park. She agreed to go out. I walked by her house, picked her up and started heading to the park. As we were walking, she was on her phone, constantly, smiling and laughing at whatever messages she was getting. But I didn't think too much of it, probably texting her family or friends. Whatever. When we got to the park we sat and started talking. As we were discussing things, I noticed she kept getting notifications every 2 minutes and she would constantly text back and forth, leaving a pause to our conversation. 20 minutes later through our date, she gets another notification, and this time I asked her, "Who you texting?" She said, "Oh, I'm just texting my FL." I asked, "What's an FL?" She said, "I'm texting my first love." I said, Okay, that explains it." Got up and left. Got back home, blocked her, and never spoke to her again. Bullet dodged. I was meeting her and her sister to watch a soccer game. We couldn't find a time we were both free, so this made sense. I showed up and she had 6 friends at the table and my seat was crammed in the corner. I took one look, assessed, and left. Edit. I first went to the bathroom so I could take a second to think. Realized I didn't want to waste my time or energy. Also didn't want to have to go and explain myself to a whole table. So I texted her that it wasn't what I had in mind and I was leaving. She texted something nasty back, so I deleted it, blocked her, and moved on. You wanna get some coke? No, a guy, and no offense, but this is boring. 20 minutes into a coffee walk and talk date she requested because anything more complicated, like mini golf, was too much of a commitment. Context: I'm 6.6, the girl is 6.3. Yes, we're both tall. 5 minutes into the date someone makes the standard "Wow, you guys would have NBA players if you had kids" comment. No biggie, brushed off, lolled, and move on. 20 minutes later she asks how I felt about that joke. I said I thought it was funny. She goes, "I think it's f'd up you didn't stand up for me." How does that lady know we're having sex? We weren't BTW. What if I don't want kids? I could see this took a turn I didn't expect, so I was trying to be rational and say it was a joke and we're both giants, so if we hang out people are going to make those jokes. I kid you not. Subject changed. We moved on. Date is going great and a customer makes a similar comment and she loses her S and gets us kicked out of the restaurant. Invited to a college party by someone who was interested in me. She and a roommate of her started making fun of a math professor at our college. The professor had intractable diabetes, leading to amputation of both legs, and blindness. He could have gone on disability, but continued to teach. The young ladies were making fun of his difficulties in writing out questions on a blackboard. They did not know that the professor was a social friend of mine. I admired his drive and persistence, and courage. As soon as they started trashing him, I got my coat and left. A couple of days later, she called and asked if something was wrong. I just told her, "I think that you and I have very different outlooks on life." Her outlining her plans that she intends on getting pregnant from someone that she doesn't intend to spend her life with, just so it doesn't complicate things when it comes to child support and spousal support. Something about it being harder when they live with you and it not being court mandated. This was before we even ordered our meal. I just took out a $20, placed it on the table, and said, "You have a good evening." She told me 15 minutes in that she didn't think we were gonna like each other. I said, "That's cool, sorry you feel that way, fair enough though." She said, "Who knows, let's hang out a little more and have a few more drinks, maybe dinner, see what happens." I was like, "What? You want me to sit here and try to convince you that we could like each other when you flat out told me you don't think we will? While also buying you drinks and dinner." I politely got the check and left. Then she was kinda annoyed and wanted me to get her an Uber home, lol. The woman wanted everything custom made at the restaurant. Everything on the side, make sure it's fresh kinda thing, and was extremely snotty to the waiter, rating him as a lower class citizen. I got up, excused myself, caught the waiter, cancelled my order, slipped him a $20 and walked out. How a person behaves to other people on a date is an indication of how they will treat you when they know you better. Met online, we agreed to have the first date at a restaurant. We're 10 minutes into the date and she tells me she wants me to pay for her food, and also 2 separate takeout orders for her 2 best friends back at home, because that's what a real man would do. I pretended like I was cool with it, said I was gonna get my card from my car, and left her ass there. Caught her in a lie and found out she was in high school. Made her show me her ID and it turns out she was 15 too. Drove her straight back to her house, dropped her off and never saw her again. In college I went on a date with a girl who rolled down her car window and threw an empty soda can out her window when she was done with it. It was a total turn off. I told her to drop me off at the next stoplight, and walked home. Really rude to the waiters and had a really sarcastic wry sense of humor. She would insult me then laugh like it was a joke. Paid the bill and said I didn't think this was going to work out and dipped. It was back in my undergrad. Pre-smartphones, but most people had cell phones. They were the alphanumeric flip phones or Nokia bricks, so texting wasn't much of a thing yet. I had asked out a girl from one of my classes, and took her out for dinner. I went to school at a university in the middle of nowhere, so there weren't a ton of first date options. We sit down and the waiter is someone I tangentially know from a class a previous semester. We get our drinks and appetizers, order our meals, and she excuses herself to the bathroom. A few minutes later, the waiter comes to the table to let me know that she's on the phone by the bathrooms, telling someone that she'll be outside in 20 minutes. When she came back, I excused myself to the restroom and went out the patio door. Got home before my roommates had headed out for the night, so I just hit the bars with them. Class was a touch awkward for the rest of the semester. She spoke loud and slow to the Latina waitress, and asked, "Do you understand?" The waitress did have an accent but could be understood perfectly when she brought our pitcher of beer. My date said, "Do they not teach you how to fill a pitcher all the way in South America?" Waitress replied, "I'm sorry, I can top it off. I just didn't want to spill it. Also, I'm from Mexico." Date, I wouldn't have admitted that. I'm Mexican myself. I excused myself, gave the waitress $100 bill and told her it was for the pitcher and her trouble, then I left. Catfished. Chick did not look at all in her pictures. I learned that day about the angles. I worked in a grocery store in my late teens and a mom always went through my line with her late teen daughter whom was not my type but was always eager to ask about my interest in her. This went on for almost 6 m, super dedicated to her craft. Almost 6 m after the last time I saw either of them, a friend of mine set me up on a blind date. You guessed it. She infiltrated my friend group to get a date. And when I arrived to meet her for the first time, I turned around without saying anything and left. It was too much for me.